Ladies and gentlemen, the first half of the Champions League semifinals have been decided. They're determined, they're set in stone. PSG will be playing Borussia Dortmund. Both sides getting through in very, very tricky, entertaining quarterfinals. Of course, Paris Saint-Germain knocking out Barcelona in Spain, and Borussia Dortmund coming back to beat Atletico Madrid at the Signal Iduna Park. Both games, like I said, wow, ending 5-4 on aggregate. And more importantly, I think both games are deserved. Both games ended in the way they should. We'll start with PSG versus Barcelona because this was the big paper tie in terms of big names, big teams, big stars. All the media attention was on this game. So we'll start with this one. PSG, of course, needing to win this game. They, of course, lost at home at the Parc des Princes 3-2. On the night, Barcelona had a remarkable comeback, but the big news from that game was really how poorly Kylian Mbappe played. And I came out of it very disappointed because he's someone that I consider the best player on the planet. And my biggest takeaway from it was that was one of the poorest performances from a player I consider at the time a best player in the world, like that I've ever watched. I can't remember many times where a player I considered the best in the world at that time play as poorly and as quietly as Mbappe did on the night. So PSG had a lot to do in the second leg to kind of get themselves back in and send them to their first Champions League semi-final in a few years. But the way the game started out, you'd think it was Barcelona who were chasing a result because they were the ones on top. They were the ones playing with impetus. They were the ones who were first to every single ball. And they were the ones who took the lead first in this game. And it came through this ever brilliant, resounding 16-year-old superstar. That's the only way I can describe him, man. Every single day, this kid's star continues to shine, continues to grow. And I truly believe we are looking at a player that when his career is all said and done, God forbid any major injuries happen, I do think we will be speaking about Lamine Yamal as one of the greatest players to ever kick it. I think he's that special. I've never seen in my life, guys, a 16-year-old perform as well as this kid does. I'm not saying I've never seen a 16-year-old as talented as him, but I've never seen a 16-year-old perform at the level he does in the pressure moments he's put in, on the stages he's kind of put in. Every test he has, he basically passes. International for Spain against Brazil. Champions League quarterfinals against PSG, against one of the best fullbacks in the world, Nuno Mendes. He takes that challenge head on and almost always comes out on top. And he plays with this remarkable maturity, and his decision-making and his temperament is all that of a 25, 26-year-old. It's not that of a 16-year-old. And it's scary that he is 16 because you're thinking when he's 25, what the hell is this kid going to look like? It's spooky, man. I mean, the first goal comes from this terrific display of just like timing. He kind of hits his foot on the accelerator against Nuno Mendes. Right when Nuno Mendes is kind of stumbling a little, he puts his foot on the accelerator, makes that separation of his defender. Outside of the boot, finds Rafinha, who gets his third goal in this tie. And Rafinha goes and celebrates. But this is Lamine Yamal, man. It's just another brilliant, resounding moment in the already short but sweet career of Lamine Yamal, which made it even more frustrating when later in that half, Lamine Yamal is sacrificed because of one of the most stupid, in my opinion, plays you'll see in the Champions League this season. Barcola. Let's speak about Barcola first before we talk about the moment. Barcola, for me, was someone who had to start in that first leg. I said it in the last review. The fact that he was kind of sacrificed for this Asensio experiment up front, where PSG were kind of playing a back 3/5. Barcola was the guy who missed out. I thought that first half that PSG played in the first leg was a major waste of time. It was a major waste of time. And Asensio swiftly was taken off in the second half for Barcola. And in my opinion, Barcola made his impact off the bench very, very quickly. He's somebody that, right? He is a bit raw. His decision-making is a little questionable at times. He's just not fully developed, in my opinion. But he has this disgusting burst of speed and this little unpredictability in his movement that makes him a handful for any defender. And over a 38-game league campaign, I think it can be a little frustrating with him. But in these Champions League knockout moments where individual moments of brilliance can make or break a tie, a guy like Barcola is a crazy weapon to have at your disposal. And he, for me, drew the defining play of this entire tie. And that is getting Ronaldo Araujo sent off. A lot of people will be questioning, should it have been a red card? Because, was Kubarsi coming in to kind of make up the ground that Araujo was leaving behind? Was he really the last man? Is it double jeopardy? Well, I mean, the fact that it wasn't a penalty proves it wasn't double jeopardy. But guys, I'm sorry. This is where, for me, the best defenders in the world make their mark and make their name. And physically and technically, I think Araujo is a top defender. But mentally, in this moment, I've started questioning him. Because when you, and it's tough to say this, right? Because moments like this happen just like that. But for me, what makes the great players so great is in these kind of decisive moments, they're able to almost slow down the game in terms of like, make a decision in the blink of an eye about what they want to do. In that moment, Araujo had to realize that he's in a situation where Barcola is going to go one-on-one against the goalkeeper, but it's Barcola. It's not Mbappe, for example. You have to kind of play the percentages game that he could still miss this chance. You have to kind of realize in that moment that you are still 1-0 up in the tie. If he does score, it's still 1-1. You're playing at home, and there's still everything to play for. And instead, what Araujo does is he basically brings him down, costs his team a major advantage in terms of now it's 11v10 for 60 minutes left in the game. And okay, now PSG haven't scored, but they have 60 minutes to find 2 goals. This is where you have to play the percentages game, man. This is where you have to kind of look forward. And I know in that kind of split moment, he's only human. But this is why the best defenders of all time don't make that decision. And I was seeing so many Barcelona fans, on the timeline talking about, okay, we just have to defend now for 60 minutes. Excuse me? You're going to defend for 60 minutes left in the game against Mbappe, Dembele, and Barcola. And worse than that, the guy who's going to get sacrificed for Araujo's dumb mistake is going to be Lamine Yamal. People are still disagreeing with me, but I genuinely think that moment right there decided the whole tie. I would never have taken Lamine Yamal off. Ever. Because I quite simply wouldn't have asked Barcelona to defend with their lives for 60 minutes. This is not Inter 2010. This is not a team created and put together to defend over large periods of the game against a team of this quality in attack. They were always going to concede 2 goals, bro. Are you crazy? The least you could have expected, though, or the least you could have asked for, is that you have a player like Yamal, who I understand is 16, but let's stop acting like he's some everyday 16-year-old. Yamal being 16 is not the same as, I don't know, Amas at Man United being 16 years old. It's completely different situations. This is a kid that you keep on, in my opinion, because of the creative ability that he has, because of the threat and transition he still has, and I think he keeps PSG's defense honest. He's the one guy for me that can get on the ball and dribble a player and create a moment, and PSG still have to be smart and honest in terms of how they defend. I think the minute you took Yamal off, you're basically inviting, in my opinion, both Hakimi and Nuno Mendes to just bomb forward, bro. There's no transition threat in behind anymore. There's no threat in terms of what Yamal can do. In my opinion, that moment right there was a hugely negative one from Xavi, and one that set his team up to fail, because Barcelona, in my opinion, okay, we have hindsight, but I said it even at the time, so I almost feel vindicated here. They were never going to be able to keep PSG out and stop them from scoring 2 goals. What they could have done, though, is they could have definitely grabbed the goal, but the minute you took Yamal off, in my opinion, the probability and possibility of that happening massively dwindled. And look, you might say that's unfair on the kid, you might say it's unfair on Barca, but that's just the way they're set up. And I felt from that moment on, PSG, I have to give them massive credit here. Because granted, they were playing against a 10-man team. But I've seen PSG now for the last 10, 11 years in moments where everyone expects them to win, in moments where everyone says, oh, no pressure on them, they're the better team here. No one finds a way of crumbling in comical fashion better than Paris Saint-Germain. So to say, oh, of course they won, they were playing against 10 men, this isn't any other team. This is PSG. They will always find a way of embarrassing themselves one way or another. So that's why I have to say, I give them massive credit in terms of how they manage the game. I thought their game maturity and their in-game management and how calm they became from that moment on in terms of, look, against 10 men, they could have just thrown everything at the wall. They could have just said, oh, we have to panic. Oh, the game's in our hands. All the pressure's on us. What do we do? Let's just spam balls to Mbappe. They could have easily done that. Instead, what they did is they just calmed down, slowed the game down, and played the game at their own tempo. They knew the goals would come if they just played their game. And that's exactly what they did. Vitinha on the night, I don't know how many touches he registered on the night, but it felt like 1,000. Because he was just getting on the ball, slowing it down, sideways, backwards, forwards. Barcelona basically parked the bus from that moment on. There was no pressure on them. So I give massive credit to Enrique, and I give massive credit to PSG in that regard, because I think it would have been very easy for a team to kind of just throw everything, throw the kitchen sink, and then leave themselves exposed on the other end, or then, I don't know, make a dumb decision. But give credit to PSG in that moment. And of course the goal came, guys. It was always going to come. I cannot believe, I'm sorry, I'm going to keep harping on this, and Barcelona fans might find me so annoying at the end of this video, but I cannot believe that you guys thought for 60 minutes it would be okay to just defend for your lives for the rest of the game. It was never going to happen. Barcola, again, ever a threat on that left-hand side, plays the ball into the box, I think looking for Mbappe, evades him, and it falls to Ousmane Dembele, who, again, another guy. Dembele, if anyone ever doubted your mentality before this game, they have to hold their hands up. You can doubt a lot about Dembele, but after this tie, you can't doubt his mentality anymore. An entire stadium gave this guy the Luis Figo treatment, raining boos on him. No pun intended, them boos. Raining boos on him, bro. And you had Xavi before the game kind of talking about, oh, we're going to make it a tough environment for him. Barca players and fans were, I would say, rightfully upset at him because, look, they stood by him for so long the last few years. the injuries, the bad form, the inconsistency, they stood by him. And for him to leave the way he did this summer, rightfully Barcelona fans felt upset. And they made it well known. And a lot of players would have crumbled in that kind of pressure cooker environment. But give credit to Dembele. Over 180 minutes this tie, he showed his quality. He showed that love him or hate him, he is a frustrating player. No one can ever take that away from Dembele. He is frustrating. He's a high volume player. But no one will ever be able to question his ability. Ever. Ever. Goal was wonderfully taken. Again, both goals were just like Dembele put every single bit of anger and vitriol and vim that he had for Barcelona behind those strikes. Just like that, PSG only need one more goal to level the aggregate in this tie. And I can't remember how the sequence of events went, whether Xavi got sent off first or whether Vitinha scored first. I can't remember. But again, another key moment in this tie, in my opinion, was when Xavi got sent off. Because again, Barcelona just never kept their heads from that red card. That's where you need to look at your manager, at your senior players, and they need to just be able to lower the temper of everybody. Lower the environment, make it just calm. I'm gonna bring you guys back to 2013 because I'll never forget this time for the rest of my life. Man United were hosting Real Madrid in the Champions League. Sir Alex's last year. First leg, we drew 1-1 at the Bernabeu, and in fact, we could have actually won that game. And in the second leg, we're up 1-0. And as you guys know, that Nani red card happens. Kung fu kick in the air, hits Arbeloa in the chest. I, to this day, think it wasn't a red card because I think he was going for the ball. I actually believe he got the ball, and then Arbeloa, like it or not, he got sent off. And I'll never forget, and my dad pointed it out on the spot, Sir Alex's reaction on the bench to Nani's red card was like he'd seen a ghost. The way he lost his head and started screaming down the official's neck and basically making a whole scene on the bench. Then all of a sudden, the whole stadium is on fire. And then all of a sudden, the players are on fire. And my dad pointed out to me, he said, look at Jose Mourinho. Mourinho, in that moment of head loss, immediately, I think, called to Modric and Kaká. Quick. Get on, slow down the tempo of the game, make it our kind of game, kill them, game over. That's exactly what happened. United players lost their heads, the stadium lost their heads, and it all kind of came from Sir Alex losing his. Because in these kinds of games, this is where you need to look at your manager on the touchline, and they say you're a reflection of your manager. It's true. When you see Xavi on the touchline, losing his head, screaming as officials, kicking stuff on the touchline, what message is that going to send to, by the way, a very young Barcelona team? Kids, for the most part. They're going to reflect what their manager did. And that's exactly what happened. All of a sudden, your manager is gone. And all of a sudden, what was already a nervous atmosphere has now kind of just like tripled in terms of stature. And again, give credit to PSG, it didn't change their game. Because the ball falls out to Vitinha, a cracker of a goal past Ter Stegen. Just like that, the tie is level on aggregate. And look, Barcelona had a few attempts on the counterattack. They were rare, but they happened every once in a while. Lewandowski in particular, I thought had a moment where it looked like Barcelona had a numerical advantage. And should he have passed, should he have shot? I'll leave that up to you guys, but I think he made the wrong decision. And I think for a player of that experience and that ability, that was a chance. And that was a moment where Barcelona, again, needed to look to an elder statesman to kind of get them out of a hole. And Lewandowski didn't do it. And on the other end, this was the most boneheaded decision of the tie. Forget Araujo, forget Xavi. This was the stupidest moment we might see in the Champions League, full stop. Ousmane Dembele finds himself chasing a ball on the edge of the inside of the box. Very, very far away from goal. And more importantly, facing away from goal, heading outside of the penalty box. He takes a touch that's going to send him outside of the penalty box, and João Cancelo cuts through him and sights him down. Now, João Cancelo, let me say your name correctly. I'm a big fan of you. We all know that. What's not to like? Trivela on lock. Where's the number 7? Left foot, right foot. Brilliant player. Amazing footballer. But that moment right there, I'm sorry, João Cancelo, is the reason why Pep Guardiola sold you, replaced you with a center back playing at fullback, and why City went on to win the Champions League with an amazing defensive record. Because Cancelo, you were a brilliant footballer, but my God, your decision-making is sometimes so frustratingly stupid. And in this moment, you cost Barcelona. You absolutely did. Because even if Dembele doesn't take that touch going on the outside, that touch that's going to get him outside of the penalty box, let's forget about even that, because that made it even stupider. Even before that moment, he is not in a dangerous, threatening position. He's on the edge of the penalty box. Why are you going to ground there? It's just stupid. It's just stupid. And it encapsulated Barcelona's night in that exact moment. Childish, immature, reckless, and the minute adversity hit, the team crumbled. This was more of a bottle from Barcelona than it was a brilliant night from PSG. Barcelona handed the night to PSG, and PSG were all too happy to take it. And now all of a sudden, you're giving Mbappe, who's had a quiet night, a pretty poor tie to this point, a penalty in a high pressure moment. You know how that shit goes, bro. Mbappe has taken penalties in the highest moments possible. Champions League quarterfinal, what is this to him? Of course he buries it past Ter Stegen. Of course, Barcelona then decide they want to commit numbers forward without their best attacker, by the way. Now they want to go for the game. PSG hit him on the counterattack. Mbappe misses the first chance. He buries the second. And it's bye-bye Barcelona. And it's into the semifinals for PSG. But really, Barcelona fans, you'll be upset at the referee. You'll be upset at Mbappe. You'll be upset at me, for God's sake. For who knows why. I'm just a fan talking to you guys on a camera. You'll be upset at all these things. But the people you should be upset about is your own team. Because Barcelona handed this tie on a golden platter to PSG. And PSG were all too happy, all too eager to take it away from them. That's all I have to say on Barcelona. They're a young team. They will be back. And to be honest, if they had won this tie, they probably would have been the favorites to go all the way to the final. But that's the way the cookie crumbles. PSG are into the semifinals. Like I said, massive shout out to Vitinha, massive shout out to Barcola, massive shout out to Dembele. And Mbappe. Let's talk about Mbappe for a quick second before we talk about Dortmund. He got a lot of criticism in this tie, from me included. First leg, horrible. I think the keep gave him a 4 out of 10. Deserved. And this was not a vintage Mbappe performance in the second leg either. But I am a little confused waking up this morning, seeing the reaction to Mbappe getting praised for this game. Oh, he didn't do anything all game. Oh, you're praising him for scoring a penalty and a 4th goal and a 4-1 win. I'm sorry, guys. Did we not just get finished watching an entire decade of Cristiano Ronaldo winning games in Champions Leagues for Real Madrid, where if we're being brutally honest here, I'm not talking about early Ronaldo at Real Madrid, I'm not talking about Ronaldo at United, but I'm talking about Ronaldo the last few years at Real Madrid, when they were winning Champions Leagues, and where, let's face it, those moments are probably what he built his GOAT case off of. Not when he was the best player, in my opinion, in 2011, 12, 09, 10, all those seasons. We were judging him and giving him all this praise for when he was winning a Champions League at Real Madrid, where he was not as complete a player, but he was decisive in big Champions League moments in sending his team through. Ronaldo wasn't playing 10 out of 10 all-around games in 16-17, in 17-18. He wasn't in 18-19 for Juventus. He wasn't, let's be honest here. But in the big moments, when his team had a last-minute penalty, when his team needed someone to kind of be the decisive figure and score the decisive goal, he was always there. If PSG win the Champions League this season, I'm not saying it's going to happen. They're not my favorite. I do think they're going to go to the final, but they're not my favorite to win it. If that happens, this game where Mbappe scored the penalty to put PSG through, and then the 4th as well too. Those are big moments, bro. In 2-3 years, we're not going to remember Mbappe played poorly. If PSG win the Champions League, we're not going to forget that Mbappe against Barcelona played poorly. We're going to remember that he scored the 2 decisive goals to send his team through the semifinal. So I do hope we keep the same energy, because it can't be for one guy, oh, Mr. Champions League, which rightfully so. Ronaldo, it counts to be decisive in big European games. But then for Mbappe, it's like, oh, he's stat padding, or oh, he's covering up a 0 out of 10 with a goal. He's a forward, bro. He's not ever going to be Messi in terms of a guy who picks up the ball in the half spaces and he's basically the hub of all your team's attacks. He isn't that kind of player. And look, I expect Mbappe going forward to be a lot better than he was this time. I'm not trying to excuse it, because let's be honest as well too, Ronaldo, when he was doing that, was towards the end of his career. His legs had already kind of gone. He was purely a poacher in those moments. Mbappe is still 24 years old. I get that. But what? When Haaland plays these kinds of performances, we're talking about how brilliant of a poacher he is. Now we're talking about his gravity in those situations. Show the same energy for Mbappe, bro. He just scored 2 goals away from home to send his team to the Champions League semifinals, and we're still looking at the negatives in his performance. I find it a little ironic. That's all. But let's move on to Dortmund versus Atletico Madrid. And I hate to tell you I told you so, but I told you so. Atletico Madrid, I said it before a ball was kicked in this tie. I said it at the halfway point when Atletico won the first leg. I'm saying it now. They were the most overrated team in this entire competition. And it was all because of one game against Inter at home. People saw Atletico maybe for the first time all season in that game. The way the Wanda was bopping, the way they eliminated a favorite in Inter. And people started thinking, oh wow, this could be Diego Simeone's chance to win the Champions League. Oh, this could be finally the year he does it. No Ronaldo, no Messi. This is one of the worst Atletico Madrid teams I have ever seen under Diego Simeone. Probably the worst defensive team I've ever seen under Diego Simeone. And even the attack, bar Antoine Griezmann, who's a baller, is kind of overrated, guys. It's kind of mid. It is mid. They're 20 points behind Real Madrid in La Liga for a reason. They're out of the Copa del Rey after being bopped by Athletic Bilbao for a reason. They even had to play Inter and barely scraped through on penalties for a reason. They are brilliant at home. No one can take that away from them. In a one-off game at the Wanda, no team wants to play Atletico Madrid. They have one of the best home supports. That stadium turns into a cauldron of fire. I get that. But from the minute a ball was kicked, there was not that much between Atletico and Dortmund, man. And I think just like how people imagine Atletico, when we think of Atletico, we think of Godin, we think of Costa, we think of Arda Turan, we think of That's not that team. The way people think of Dortmund, we think of bottlers. We think of, oh, in the Champions League, they're never going to be those guys. They're the little brother. They always capitulate. Maybe we have to admit that that's not that team either. Dortmund had a tougher task, a tougher route getting to this point than Atletico did, and yet no one wanted to give Dortmund credit for it. They came out of the group of death. Everyone looked at Milan, PSG, who they're going to play, and Newcastle, and everybody predicted Dortmund to come last. They topped that group. They played against PSV, and people are going to think Dutch League, Dutch League. Look at PSV's form this season. Look at their results. Look at how they have one of the hottest strikers in Europe right now, doing the business for them. And look how Dortmund took care of them. And yet again, in this tie, bar the first 20 minutes of the first leg where Atletico, to be fair, it was like a boxing fight. They hit him with a quick jab, knocked Dortmund out, but Dortmund did well to get back into that game. Bar those first 20, 30 minutes in the first leg, Dortmund were the better team almost the entirety of this tie. And they are rightfully going on to the next round. Rightfully. Big shout out to Julian Brandt, because Faisal was talking about who's the guy that Dortmund are going to look to kind of help them in this tie. Brandt didn't start the first leg, I think, through injury. Came on, had an instant impact, assisted Haller. Almost scored at the death as well too. And then in this game as well, had a massive hand in almost everything that Dortmund were doing. I thought he was brilliant. Shout out Ian Maatsen on loan from Chelsea, getting his first Champions League goal. Shout out Jadon Sancho, who has just kind of refound himself a little bit since he left Man United and just proven that there is life after all after Man United. Sabitzer as well too, similar to him. Bino Gittins, my boy, youngster coming off the bench, always making an impact. Mats Hummels, bar the own goal, I thought was exemplary. His passing remains one of the best from a defender in Europe. And Terzic as well too, probably the least talked about manager in the rest of the competition. But again, another really good story in terms of him. Terzic, since he's come to Dortmund, I think originally he came as like the interim for Marco Rosa, and since then, I think that's him, right? If I'm wrong, correct me, but I just think his impact at Dortmund has been really, really slept on. I think this Dortmund team in general has been slept on and disrespected, and I hope going forward they do get the respect that they need. Because, look, I think sometimes we just look at teams' names and we don't watch them all season. We watch them one game in the Champions League and we all of a sudden know their whole story. We do the same thing with players. It's not that simple, guys. Big shout out to Dortmund. Big shout out to PSG. They are, in my opinion, the deserved winners of each of these Champions League semifinals. They'll go on to play. My early prediction, without thinking about it too much, again, Dortmund will not be easy for PSG. They showed in the group stage they won't be easy. But I see something with PSG and Mbappe's last season at PSG. I see them making the final. I don't know if they'll win it, but I do think they'll beat Dortmund, and I do think they will be the team that whoever from that left-hand side of the bracket plays in this year's Champions League final. But that being said, this has been my Champions League roundup for the first round of second legs of the quarterfinals. We'll be back tomorrow to kind of review Bayern versus Arsenal and Man City versus Real Madrid. As you guys know, like, share, subscribe, comment down below who do you think will win tonight's games. This is my clips channel. If you guys aren't aware, all the extracurricular stuff kind of sits on this channel, while the main channel stuff sits on, of course, the main channel. But it's been your boy Lyes. It's been a Champions League roundup, and I'll see you when we see you. Peace.